there is a logic to it, and so it's not crazy. There is a real logic that I love my parents. My parents treat me badly, so being treated badly must be right. That's a logical flow. And so then, if I want to be treated right, I must treat myself badly. And if I want other people to treat me right, I must let them treat me badly because I'm just following the example. Having no other frame of reference as a child, I assume that that treatment from my parent is what love is.
Hello, and welcome back to Healing and Growing Hand in Hand podcast. I'm your host, Lisa Tickle, and our guest today is Dr. Mark Hicks. And we're going to talk about relationships, which I was saying before we started recording. You can never talk too much about relationships and how to manage them because there's so many layers to relationships. And so I'm really glad that we're talking about it. And I'll just mention a little bit about Dr. Mark Hicks. And he is an author, a ghostwriter, a counselor, and a relationship specialist. And he has a book, and he'll talk a little bit more about that and give us an update on that. But his book is Learning Love, Building a Life That Matters, and Healthy Relationships That Last. And kind of the topic, to be more specific, that we're going to talk about within relationships, and I love this, is the 5 components of love to building healthy relationships, even if they come from a dysfunctional or abusive family. And so many of us need help in this area. So welcome, Dr. Mark Hicks.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
I'm glad you're here, and thank you for taking the time to talk to us about this. And I'm looking forward to really diving into this. So tell us more about you, and then tell us the update on your book.
Yes, very exciting things going on with the book. I originally self-published Learning Love last year, and enjoyed that process a lot. But now it has been picked up by Morgan James Publishing. So the original uh, version of the self-published version is no longer available. And in 2025, it will be available nationwide wherever books are sold from Morgan James Publishing. And we will have pre-orders available
Mhm.
over the next few months. And so I'm hoping people will go to my website, which is markahicks.com, and keep up with the pre-orders and when the publication is available in June of 25. In the meantime, I do have a free ebook available on my website, The 5 Components of Love. So what we'll be talking about today with these 5 components, you can get on my website a little brief rundown of all 5 components of love to sort of hold you over until my book is published in 25.
A little teaser for the book, huh?
Absolutely.
That's great. Well, that's great. So what made you become a relationship coach or relationship? Sorry, yeah, specialist. Excuse me, because you don't call yourself a coach.
Well, Well, I do some coaching, but I really began to specialize in relationships. Sort of just fell into it over a course of time because it was both my professional and personal experience that led me here. I was lucky to be raised in a very healthy, happy household. No household is perfect, of course, but everything in my childhood was just wonderful, and I have very fortunate to be able to say that. However, even with that good upbringing, I ended up in a toxic first marriage,
Mm.
ended in divorce. I still have the emotional scars to prove that one, and it just goes to show that no matter what background you come from, relationships are very difficult. They are complicated, and we all got to get scars along the way. And so, in that experience, I began to wonder, uh, maybe not consciously, but looking back, I can see that the seeds were being planted for me to really wonder what love is and how to live it out in a real way. And then, of course, I do come from a counseling background of a master's degree in mental health counseling.
Mm.
And so I've worked as a professional counselor. And of course, that is a lot about relationships. I also come from a theological background, a background of spirituality, and that is a lot about relationships as well.
True.
And so, from my personal experience, from being a professional counselor, from being in ministry and working in spirituality and theology, all of those roads sort of converged into a question of what is love and
Mm.
how do we live these healthy, happy, thriving relationships in every area of life. And that, of course, includes marriage and family, but it also includes friends and
Hmm.
neighbors and coworkers. The relationship you would have with your spouse is obviously very different than you would have with a coworker, but the principles, the components of building those healthy relationships are the same regardless of what relationship we're talking about. So if you learn love, you learn these healthy relationships through the five components of love, you can not only build a healthy home life, but it can help you in your work life as well as you connect with people in the office, you have build relationships in your career. All of these components work in every area.
One question I have for you that, and I think you'll agree with it, is, isn't it true that in order to have really healthy relationships with others, you've got to have a healthy relationship with yourself?
Yeah, it's absolutely true. In fact, that's the fourth component that I list in my book, and they're not listed in any particular order. They're
Hmm.
all five important. That happens to be the fourth one, that you have to love and accept yourself first. You actually cannot love other people more than you love yourself. I always quote Brene or reference Brene Brown here because she's done some tremendous research in this area and is very noted for that statement that you cannot love other people more than you love yourself. And that's because love is not a commodity like money. If you need more money, you can go out and get a second job or get a loan or borrow from friends, or there's a lot of different ways you can theoretically acquire more money if you need it. We
Right.
can't just acquire love. We have to grow it within us. It's organic. And so as it grows within us, we love ourselves, we accept ourselves, we learn how to love and accept others. It's critically important to be able to do that. And that's where a lot of people struggle is
Right.
they expect that these relationships will help them love themselves. And that's not actually possible.
That's
You have
so
to love
true.
yourself in order to love others
That's so true
and,
that,
and even accept the love of others.
when I think back into my days when I was, really in the beginning of my healing journey, and I was desperate for love. I was really desperate for love. And my focus was getting love from others. And I completely was, I I had blinders on. So I didn't even see the relationship with myself. And then I got to a point where I kind of understood, well, we need to be our own best friend. And I used to say that a lot, but I didn't walk it out at all. And it wasn't until later on in my healing journey that I realized I recognized I had a horrific relationship with myself. I actually was abusing myself because that's what I was taught.
Yes.
Yeah. So undoing that
If
was
you are,
a lot.
of course, and when you are mistreating yourself, it begins to feel normal. And then when
True.
people mistreat you, you don't stand up for yourself. You
Mhm.
lean into those relationships because even though it is abusive, it feels normal to you.
So true.
And abusers, unfortunately, can see this coming a mile away.
Hmm.
They can spot people that have that kind of vulnerability. And so it's a dangerous place to be abusing yourself, mistreating yourself, talking so badly to yourself, and accepting that as normal in relationships. When you learn to love yourself, it's just the opposite.
Hmm.
You expect people to treat you right,
Hmm.
to speak to you well. It doesn't mean that we don't have arguments and disagreements. Of course, every relationship does, but it means that you're treated well even in the midst of those struggles. And we
Yes.
begin to expect that of ourselves and from others, and people can spot that as well. They begin to treat you with more of the respect that you deserve because you're showing that to yourself and to them.
Hmm. Yeah, I can think back and, I just didn't even recognize it at the time of how I treated myself. But when I look back and I think about it, it's pretty horrific. Like I wouldn't treat anybody the way I treated myself. I wouldn't.
Right.
But I didn't
Yeah.
see it. I was completely blinded to it. And actually one of them wasn't that long ago that one of the components of how I treated myself. And I didn't even, this went pretty deep and it was really interesting. And I think I was maybe upset about something, but it wasn't anything really big. But I remember walking out of my bathroom and into the hallway and actually hearing the voice of my abuser, but it was me.
Yeah.
But there was that moment of recognizing, whoa, where'd that come from? And whoa, that was my voice. And I just really, it was something really bad. I don't remember what it was, but it was something really bad that I was saying to myself. And I automatically started feeling bad. And then like I said, I realized, I took a minute, I went, wait a minute. And I recognized the voice and recognized what it was saying and dismissed that immediately. But it's really interesting. how the self-talk can really do a
Oh,
number.
it's so powerful. And we do have to recognize that. It's that moment of recognition that starts to change the path because we just get used to it and
Yeah,
our brains begin to normalize things that we're accustomed to.
true.
And it begins if we our brains are interesting things. They get into habits. Our brains just form habits. They form those neural pathways and it becomes easier. So the more we do something, the easier it is. That's true of everything from learning to cook to play basketball. The more we do it, the easier it is. It's also true about how we speak to ourselves.
Yep.
The more we speak badly to ourselves, the easier it is to do that. And the more our brains develop those neural pathways to make great big super highways of criticism for ourselves. And then
Yeah.
when we try to say good things about ourselves, it feels really weird. It feels unnatural, like we're doing something wrong somehow to speak good to ourselves and treat ourselves well. And it's not that it's wrong; it's just that our brains aren't used to it yet.
It's
Anything
foreign.
yeah, it's foreign to us, and it's the same awkwardness we would have if we've never played a sport or if we've never done some sort of activity. If we have never been on a farm in our life and we walk out into the barn and start trying to take out our animals, it's going to feel really weird. We just don't know how to do those things,
Right.
but we can learn.
Right.
And that's the idea of love and relationships, even relationship with ourselves. It is a learned skill set. No
Right.
matter where you are now in that journey, you can learn not only to love yourself, but to love others and to receive the love of others and build the healthy relationships you want. But it does, you're absolutely right. It starts with loving yourself.
Mm-hmm. You know, there's this weird loop I can remember being in, and maybe you can explain it because it makes zero sense to me. It's just kind of our funky brain. And when we've been through abuse, it does funky things. But I can remember, and this sounds crazy, but at the time, it kind of felt good to talk bad about myself. It felt good to basically abuse myself. It sounds so odd, but I can remember thinking there's like this weird rush that I would get when I would say that stuff. But of course, within minutes, I'm not feeling good about myself at all. But there was that weird rush that I would feel at the moment when I would say it, like, oh, that felt good to say that. But then a few minutes later, I'm like, no, that did not feel good. That I don't feel good about myself now. So what is that?
Well, when we get used to anything, there is that sense of comfort in it. There is
Yeah.
that sense of this is right and normal, even if it's not
Right.
healthy. And it also, if you are coming from a background of being abused, especially from very important people in your life that you care about, like parents that
Yeah.
you have a natural bond to, then it begins these feelings of being abused, but the love and attachment and the bond for a parent get confused. And so it begins to wind around one another so that that abuse is related back to that bond and that love that we have for our parents. And so it feels normal and it feels bonding and it feels comforting, even though it's horribly unhealthy. And these things are very tough to unlearn because our brains, as we said, just gets used to feeling that way. Our emotional state feels this is right. This is the way I should be treated because this is the way my parents treated me, and my parents must
Yeah.
be right because they're my parents.
Right.
And we have these assumptions that are not true. One of the things that I often ask in these situations is who made that rule? I have to appreciate how my parents treat me. Who made that rule? There are good parents and there are bad parents and there
Mhm.
are parents who struggle even though they're good people and there's
Yeah.
all range of parenting out there. Who made the rule that we have to just accept everything about family?
Mhm.
We can care about them, we can show respect for them, we can love them, but we don't have to emulate them. Right? That's not a rule. That's
Right.
not part of nature. The rule is the sun has to come up in the morning. There's certain rules of nature that have to be honoring what our parents do that is abusive and repeating that on ourselves is not a rule, but it feels like it
Mhm.
because that was such a impressionable time as a child. We just assume that what is done to us as a child, we assume that's what the world is because we have no other frame of reference.
Right. So
And
that's the way you explained that though was powerful, and I think I got it. And it is twisted what our brains do to us, but
yeah,
because that's what we were used to and what was normal, that it's it just becomes comforting in that moment because we're getting attention. I'm still getting attention. I'm
Yeah.
still getting some kind of payback even. So that I get it. That's so, but now that I'm on the other side of it, it just seems like, God, it just seems so crazy, but it makes sense. And that's the
Yeah.
crazy part about, abuse and what it does to us. It does some crazy stuff to us.
There is a logic to it. And so it's
Yeah.
not crazy. There
Yeah.
is a real logic that I love my parents. My parents treat me badly, so being treated badly must be right.
Right.
That's a logical flow.
Right.
And so then if I want to be treated right, I must treat myself badly.
God.
And if I want other people to treat me right, I must let them treat me badly because I'm just following the example. Having no other frame of reference as a child, I assume that treatment from my parent is what love is. So if you come from an abusive background, you have to unlearn these things.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not crazy because there is a line of logic.
Right.
When you get on the other side of it, you realize it's a flawed logic.
Correct.
That it is not what needs to be. That there is a better alternative, but it's not bizarre or crazy, and there's nothing wrong with you if you're in that place of life. You're following a a basic system of logic, but unfortunately, you're following a system of logic that doesn't work for a healthy life, and you have an opportunity then, once you see it, to follow a different line of reasoning.
That is just, it makes so much sense. I mean, I'm sitting here in awe because you really answered a question. And it's true because when you're in this place, like when I was on my healing journey in survival mode, and I talk about this, that, you do things that you wouldn't do outside of survival mode, right? There's things that we did that, outside of survival mode, I would never do. And
Right.
you get caught up in that, and it's the way that you see that your behavior isn't okay because you can see it kind of from other people's reactions, but you don't know why. And and then you start looking at it because you're looking at it from almost like a normal point of view. And when you look at it like that, it's like, that's just what you just did was just crazy. But on this end, it's like, it makes sense to me. And then
Yeah.
you put that answer in there of why we do it and why it is logical. And it's like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
I'm not crazy. Okay, good.
No. And that's why it is so important that everyone, especially if you have been in an abusive or toxic relationship, but I'll go so far as to say everyone needs to be in therapy, needs
I
to have a
agree.
coach, needs to have counseling,
Yep.
because we do get into these lines that are logical flows, but they're not healthy.
Correct.
And just having someone to reflect that and to talk about it and to say, is that really a rule?
Yeah.
And to look at other logical flows that are more healthy. Everyone needs to be in counseling
Mhm.
because life is too complicated.
Yeah.
And we go to a doctor if we're sick. We go to a dentist with a toothache. We go to a mechanic when when we're having trouble with our car. Our emotional and mental health is much more difficult
Yeah.
than a lot of those things.
Well, it's been
Uh,
so taboo for so long, right? And now it's
yeah,
finally, you know, we're not there yet, but it's certainly better as far as mental health and starting to understand it. And like you say, everybody needs to be in therapy. I agree,
everyone.
100%.
It's just too complicated. Life is too
It
complicated. And
is.
again, people who say, well, there's a taboo to it, that's true. But again, I would say, who made that rule? Who
Exactly.
decided that we could go to a doctor for a bum shoulder, but we can't go to a doctor or a psychologist or a counselor or get a coach in order to work on our mental and emotional health, particularly if we've been through tragedy and trauma and
Hmm.
abuse. But even if we haven't, no one gets through this life without scars.
That's true.
Everyone experiences
Yeah.
difficulties. We could, and everyone experiences difficulties that leave those emotional scars. And one of the things that I always say is that there are some things that are so painful that they'll leave a hole in your heart.
Oh, yeah.
But you can live a really good life with a hole in your heart.
Yeah.
And once we begin to understand that we can't undo the past, and we'll
Hmm.
have those emotional scars and we'll have that hole in our heart,
Hmm.
but you can live a really good life with a hole in your heart.
Hmm.
And we learn that. We learn how to stay connected, build relationships in a new way. And yes, we'll have scars from our past, but that's okay.
Hmm.
Everyone has them to a certain extent. And when we understand things like grief, which is actually the first component of love, and we
Yeah.
understand things like doing going to counseling or having a coach or therapist or someone in our life that can help us grieve these things
Yeah.
and come to a new understanding, we're going to have a lot healthier life in the process.
It's true. It's true. Because so often we try to do things on our own. And I know
Mhm.
certainly the early part of my healing, I did so much of that on my own. And, it could have been shortcutted, if I would have been able to
Yeah.
get the right kind of therapy.
Yeah, a lot easier, a lot healthier. Yeah, of course, people can heal on their own. That can happen, but people can heal on their own from physical ailments as well. But
Sure.
why would you want to? If you
Right.
could go to a doctor, there's you might be able to figure out how to fix your car, but you might do more damage in the process.
Yeah.
Take it to a mechanic, for crying out
Yeah,
loud.
that's
Why
true.
would our mental emotional health is just as important as our car or our teeth,
It's true.
and so
And
we need to get the help.
and people need to realize too that our mental health also affects our physical health.
Of course,
It's
absolutely.
all linked.
So it's all linked. There's really no division at all. So some of those ailments that we're going to the doctor for physically can be addressed, maybe not entirely, but partially through living a healthier,
Yeah,
happier, more thriving life, and that comes down to a lot of times to our relationships,
exactly.
including the relationship with ourselves.
Exactly. Exactly. Wow, this is already a power packed podcast. I'm telling you, it's already so great. I love what we're talking about because, this is just stuff that it's not talked about enough. And I'm sitting here thinking, there's no playbook on life, really. There isn't. And that's why I was thinking we do need a therapist or a coach or somebody that we can bounce this stuff off of because there is no playbook. Excuse me. And frankly, we shouldn't expect ourselves to know how to do this, to know how to navigate every part
Right.
of life, right?
Of course. Yeah, and that's really the big motivation for writing my book is to have that playbook for love and relationships because we just assume that love just develops.
Right.
Well, it can. If you come from a healthy, happy, thriving background as a child, you probably did learn one or two or three of the components of love and you can kind of do okay. I don't know that anybody knows all five just instinctively from their family. These are things we have to learn along the way. That if we're having thriving relationships, many people look back and say, yeah, we kind of had this rough spot and I learned some things from it and now we're doing better. We learn things the hard way. And so what I wanted to do was create a structure where we could have a context for love and know how to build those healthy relationships. Even if we did come from a healthy family, we might be missing a couple.
Mm-hmm.
And if we didn't, we're probably missing four or five.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So let's get into that. Let's talk about the five components of a
Okay.
relationship. Yeah, I'm really interested. And you said the first is grief.
The first is grief, and that surprises some people because we assume when we're talking about love that we're going to talk about bubblegum and butterflies, everything is sweet and beautiful. And we get to that. There is certainly an element of that. But as I said earlier, no one gets through life without scars.
Yeah.
And there is always going to be difficulties along the way. And there's going to be bumps in the road in every relationship. And things are going to be said and mistakes are going to be made. And we have to come back from that. And especially if we have been through a dysfunctional family experience or we've been through a divorce, then we have to heal from those things in order to stay connected, to live that good life with a hole in our heart and stay connected in those relationships. If we talk to people that are struggling in relationships and keeping people out of their life, they have barriers, they guard their heart, they
Yeah.
push people out of their lives, they live life defensive. Those are people that have been hurt
Yeah.
somewhere along the
Yeah.
line. And if we're going to lower those defenses and stay engaged in relationships and have a chance of building those healthy relationships, we have to grieve the hurts along the way, big and small. It can be something as dramatic as abuse, or it can be smaller things along the way. Something someone said to us along the way at a vulnerable point in time can really
Yeah.
affect our life. And we
True.
have to grieve those moments as well, even though we may look back and think, well, that was probably trivial. It's not trivial at the time.
Right.
And so we have to grieve those things when we have the skill of grief. And very often, once again, that has to come from getting proper counsel, getting proper treatment and
Mm-hmm.
counseling, or get some coaching through that so that we can have that foundation. grief becomes a healer. Grief becomes our comeback story. We can then say, yeah, I had this very difficult relationship. It ended in a divorce. I came from a dysfunctional family, but I have grieved my way through that. I have come to a place that I can engage again. And we now have that comeback story of living the life we deserve, rather than staying stuck behind our own prison walls that we've built to protect ourselves.
Yeah, and grief is definitely something that you shouldn't try to do on your own. I've been
No.
there. Actually, I lost my mom when I was 16, and there was no time for grief at all. Like nobody helped me with it, and it was, I just remember literally thinking, whose mom dies at 16, and then going, okay, well, I guess I go back to school on Monday.
Yeah. Yeah. And the thing is with grief, you can delay it, but it's not going anywhere.
Right.
It's not leaving.
Yeah.
You still have to go through the process of grief. You can push it back for a while,
Mm-hmm.
maybe for years, maybe for decades, but
Mm-hmm.
it will still be
Yep.
there. And sooner or later, you have to face it. And so
Yep.
have the courage to go to a counselor and face that grief so that you can live those life of relationships that you really want.
Yeah, because you can get stuck in grief. You can get stuck in the different
Absolutely.
places of grief. And I'll tell you, the thing that worked for me, and I was in therapy when I did this. So this was how many decades later? 3 decades later. It was after I lost my dad, and I literally went and sat at their gravesite. And this is another thing that I just felt led to do, and it worked. But I sat there and I wrote a letter to both of them because I first I started updating my mom on my life, because think about it, at that point I'm in my 40s. So imagine, I've had 30 something years of life. And so, I started sharing with her, and then updating my dad. And then what it did is it made me kind of see them in a different light.
Mm-hmm.
And then helped me understand more in depth, not from a 16-year-old mind, but from a 40 something year old mind, and understand it better. I don't know. It was really cathartic writing to them and just I don't know how long I sat there. I think it was a good 10, 15 pages of handwritten, but it was really healing for me.
Well, it is. And so many people that are resisting grief, resisting counseling, just want to pick themselves up by their bootstraps and
Yeah.
grit their teeth and lean forward into the wind.
Yeah.
They will say things like, well, what's counseling going to do? How's it going to help to talk about it? It's not going to bring my mom back. It's not going to change my childhood. Or they may say, what good is that going to do to write a letter? I already have things in my mind, but so what if I write it down or not? And
Oh,
just quite frankly, I say, don't knock it till you've tried it.
exactly.
There are so many people that I've talked to. I remember one person that came to me because he was kind of pushed into it by some family members dealing with grief. And he said, I already know what you're going to say. And I said, okay, tell me what I'm going to say. And he went through some stereotypes that counselors would say that he probably saw on television. And I said, okay, well, let me tell you what I'm actually thinking. And I went through some things similar to what we've talked about already today. And he just kind of sat there mesmerized. And I said, is that what you expected me to say? And he said, no. I said, is that helpful at all? He said, that's actually extremely helpful.
Oh,
And a lot of people have that kind of experience in counseling. I
yeah.
have any number of stories where people were resistant to come to counseling because they had these stereotypes in their mind of
Mhm.
this isn't going to work because it won't change the situation. No, it won't change the situation, but it can help you live that really good life with a hole in your heart.
Mhm.
And that's not a skill set most people just naturally have.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. And there's something to be said too. And I say this a lot on my podcast about the thoughts that are going through your head. And then when you put them to life, whether you speak them or you
Yes.
write them, a lot of times especially the negative thoughts, they lose their power. So it's always good. Like I said, I was led to go do that. Nobody told me to do it. I just felt led to do it, but it was really helpful. It was really, really helpful.
Very powerful.
Mm-hmm.
It's very powerful, and everyone should give in to those thoughts. So maybe I should try this. Try it. I mean, if you did something like that, you wrote a letter, and it really didn't help, you're not out anything.
Right.
You didn't do any harm. You
Right.
tried. There's something though along the way. If you're willing to try these things, there will be something that will have that moment that will help you down that path of healing.
Exactly. Exactly. So that's number one component, and that was really good. Yeah, we could
Yes.
probably do a whole podcast just on that alone because
Yeah.
that's huge. There's a lot.
That's
There's
a
a
big
lot
one.
when it comes to grief. A lot. So what's the second
Yes.
component?
The second is emotion. That's the one everyone knows. We expect that love will be emotional. And for some
Yeah.
people, that's very easy, very natural. They connect with people on a very instinctive level. For other people, it's not so easy. More people, some people are very introverted. They're more cerebral. They
Yeah.
don't really like showing a lot of emotions. And to
Mm-hmm.
those folks, I say that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to change your personality. But the people in your life you care about need to know you care about them.
Yes.
And so this, all of these components, but particularly with emotion, it's a practice. If it comes easy to you and it's instinctive, good for you, enjoy it. If it's not, practice it. Learn to say I love you if you love someone. And
Mm-hmm.
if you come from a background where love was used as a weapon and love is a bad word in your context and it brings up negative connotations, then don't say it. Say things like, I appreciate you,
Mm-hmm.
or learn to say thank you when
Mm-hmm.
somebody does something nice for you. Just learn to engage in emotion and words of emotion that let people know you appreciate them, that you care about them. In all your relationships, at home, at work, everywhere else,
Mm-hmm.
will help build those emotional connections that really bring us together.
Yeah. Yeah. True. And coming from someone who feels her emotions as well as others, that can be kind of overwhelming too. And we do have to, we have to keep our emotions somewhat in balance, because out of balance, like what I used to do, my emotions used to take me places that I should have never gone.
Well, that actually leads us into the third component of love, which
Perfect.
is practicality.
There you go.
Prac- Practicality is the third component of love. Emotion brings us together. Practicality keeps us together. Practicality is living life well together. And
Mm.
so it's all those daily grind sort of things. If you're a married couple, you have to deal with money issues.
Hmm.
You have to learn how to deal with money and budgeting and how you're going to handle that. Communication skills, and that is a learned skill set to learn how to talk to one another.
Yeah.
Dealing with things like mental health, because
Yeah.
depression and anxiety and things of that nature will not only take a toll on you, it will take a toll on your relationships,
Yeah.
particularly within your family and your romantic partnership and marriage. And those things are treatable. Those are treatable conditions. And so it becomes a practical reality to get treatment for those things, to take care of yourself so that you can be there in your relationships in a healthy way. And a practical element is some relationships have to end.
Yeah.
That is a practical
Yeah.
reality of love, that every relationship can't be saved. And that's sometimes surprising coming from a relationship coach and someone who writes a book about love. They expect that I'm going to say every relationship can be saved. Theoretically, if everyone involved is practicing the 5 components of love, then yes.
Yes.
But that's not going to happen every
Right.
time. Not everyone's going to do that. Some people are abusive, and no one should live in relationships of abuse.
Hmm.
If you're in a toxic or abusive relationship, yes, you can give it chances. Yes, you can go to counseling and see if it can be saved, and it's possible. But if you come to a place where you understand this is chronic, some relationships have to
Yeah.
end in order to live the relationships that you actually want, need, and deserve. To have
Yeah.
room in your life for the relationships that are healthy, sometimes you have to eliminate an unhealthy one. And that's a painful process,
Hmm.
which takes us back to grief. That
Hmm.
grief is the comeback story when you have to make that very painful decision to end a relationship with a family member, to go through a divorce, to eliminate someone from your life. There's going to be a grief process to that, but we can come back from that grief process. And so emotion is very important to have those emotional connections, but practicality is the way we live life well together. And that's the one we sometimes forget, particularly if you are a very emotional person, because they don't make rom-com movies about practical guys that make good decisions.
Yeah.
And so we get caught up in the emotional element of it, which is very important. But living that practical life, making good decisions, living life well together is vital as well.
And on the practical side as well, what happened with me is there's people in my life that I outgrew.
Yes.
And that, and I've heard this before, and I think it's true that sometimes people in our life for a reason or a season. And I think that's
Of course.
true. Yeah. And, sometimes they're here just for a reason, and we learn something and or we teach them something, but there is something to be said too, and there is a grieving process with that as well.
Yes.
Because for me, it was a struggle because I love these people, of course. And it wasn't like all of a
Yeah.
sudden they're these bad people and I couldn't be friends with them anymore. It's just, I outgrew them and we didn't have anything in common anymore. I couldn't relate to them anymore. And some of their behavior was destructive, mostly to themselves and sometimes to others. And so you're right. There's still a grieving process, even though I know it's the right decision. I still love these people and care about them and still wish them the best. But there's a loss. There's definitely a loss.
Absolutely. Anytime we go through a change of something that was important to us and may still be important to us, there's going to be a grief process. And
Hmm.
that's why love, while it surprises people, is a critical aspect of love to be healthy in our relationships. Because, yes, some relationships are only for a while. And that is going to be a difficult decision. And sometimes, it's not a decision. Things like grandparents, in the natural order of things, we may be, extremely close to our grandparents, but they are, most likely we are going to outlive them by
Yeah.
a number of decades. And so some relationships are meant to be that way, and that's okay. And that's why grief is so important. It brings us through that journey to understanding the value of that relationship. Choosing to leave a relationship, moving on from a relationship, doesn't devalue the relationship at the time. It
Yes.
just means you're in a different season of life, and it doesn't
Yes.
have to be mean and cruel and
Mm-mm.
and
Shouldn't be.
dramatic. It can just be a moving on,
Yeah.
and that's okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. We shouldn't be mean. We shouldn't be cruel to anybody. It's just moving on
Yeah,
and coming to terms with that.
absolutely.
Yeah. So number 4 was what again? You said I touched on it.
The fourth component of love is acceptance, and that is
Yeah.
mostly accepting ourselves.
Yes.
It does imply an accepting of others, because if we're in a relationship with people, they're going to make mistakes,
Right.
and we have to accept that about them within limits. Abuse is not a mistake. Abuse is a different thing
Right.
entirely. But people are going to make mistakes, and we accept that. But we start by accepting ourselves, and that involves compassion for ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Valuing ourselves as a
Mm-hmm.
person, seeing the good side of ourselves, and understanding even the things that we are struggling with, and the mistakes we make, and the bad side of ourselves, so to speak. That's still a learning process. We
Mm-hmm.
we get to fix that.
Mm-hmm.
Knowing there's something bad about you in your life that you don't like. Well, good. We can fix that now.
Yeah.
If you're aware of it, you don't have to beat yourself up for it.
Right.
Now you have the opportunity to fix it.
Right.
It doesn't mean that you like going through that process, but it is good news
Mm-hmm.
when you start to realize, I really just do not like this, or what I'm doing is very destructive. I worked for a number of years leading a recovery program, dealing with addiction and a number of other recovery issues. And when people start to realize, I'm really an addict, that's great news.
Yeah.
Now we can work on that, and there is a path to healing. And so it doesn't feel very good, but even the things that we don't like about ourselves, that's okay. We can accept that, because now we have the power and the ability to make changes in our life, to heal from that, find that path of healing. And so we can still love ourselves even with our negative traits.
Exactly. Exactly. And there's a saying that a very dear friend of mine says all the time, and she's really taught me a lot, and that is to be curious rather than judgmental, right? And that's kind of what you're
Absolutely.
talking about. Just be curious about our situation. And and some of the stuff that's helped me in my healing is understanding my behavior and why I behaved the way I did.
Hmm.
Because, and I talk about this a lot, but it's really important for people to understand this, because before I had the knowledge, I just thought I was crazy. I thought I was a bad person. I thought I was a mess. I thought, these bad things of myself. And now that I've understood, and I've come a long way on my healing journey, but also understanding that my behaviors and where those behaviors came from. And it came directly
Yes.
from my childhood abuse. And it doesn't mean that there isn't consequences, and it doesn't mean that it didn't affect others. But what it did is it separated my identity from my behavior and gave me that
Yes.
space to give myself the grace and to allow myself to be curious and to forgive myself, most importantly.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
Because we always do what we think is best at the time. Now we can
Correct.
be mistaken. We can look back on that and think, well, that wasn't a very good idea.
Right.
But that's just part of being human. but we are doing what we think is best at the time.
Right.
And as Maya Angelou famously said, when you know better, you do better.
Yeah.
When we learn that that was a mistake, that's not working for me, that is a path that may have worked at the time, or may have seemed to work at the time, or gave me a way to deal with stuff at the time, but that's not working for me.
Right.
And so I have to do something else. Going back to addiction, very often people are in addiction because they are self-medicating mental illness, or they're trying to cover up, or deal with emotions they just aren't dealing with very well.
Right.
And so they're using drugs or drinking in order to stifle things rather than deal with them. Well, that may seem like it worked at the time. And so you don't have to beat yourself up. You
Right.
did what you thought would work, but now you know that's not working.
Right.
That was never a good idea to start with. And now we can have a different path. And so it's not about your identity. Who you are is a person of value. I tell the story, or the analogy in my book, or more of an allegory, I suppose, of what if we imagined a diamond the size of a baseball. It's perfectly cut, perfectly clear, absolutely perfect in every way. How much would that be worth? Well, obviously, it's priceless. Now, we take that out into a rural area, out into the cow pasture, and we roll it around in the muck and the mire and the cow manure, bring it back in. How much is it worth now? It's still priceless.
Yes. Just
It
wash
hasn't
it
changed
off.
at all. You just wash it off. It has not changed one bit if you know what it is. But if you just look at the outside and you don't know what's really there, you think it's just horrible. You think it's a big ball of nasty. You don't want anything to do with it. So many people are looking at what life has done to them. They see the muck and the mire and the cow manure that we've been rolled around in because of our own mistakes, because of what people have done to us, because of abusive backgrounds, because of all kinds of things that life just brings. We have been rolled around in all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And we look at that and we think, well, I'm a mess. I am worthless. I am nobody. And that's just not true.
No.
That's just the stuff that life has put on us,
Mm-hmm.
because life is hard.
Mm-hmm.
And life has its difficulties. Doesn't mean it's all bad, but it means there are elements that are just going to be rough and they're going to mess us up. But what's underneath there is still exquisite.
Mm-hmm.
It is a beautiful creation. And you clean that off, and that's what healing is. That's what recovery is. You start cleaning off all the muck and the mire and the cow manure, and what you find out is you've got a priceless diamond right there that all of us
Yep.
are of priceless value, of exquisite creation. We just have to learn that sometimes and get past the exterior that was put on us. Sometimes before we even really knew ourselves as a child, we were rolled around in all that stuff. We have to learn what's actually there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because my abuse went back as far as I can remember. So
yeah,
my normal is very different than other people. That's interesting.
But we can still clean that off. We can still heal from that, and we can still find out how valuable we actually are.
That's the beautiful thing, is that we can wash it off and we can heal from it, and we can live the full life, like you're saying. Absolutely. And that's for everybody. And it's, for the listeners out there, it's so hard to even imagine that when you've never experienced that. But trust me, from somebody who came from that and who is living a very different life, and it's not because I'm special. It's not because I'm better than anybody else. I've done the work. I'm still doing the work. Yeah. And boy, let me tell you, it was difficult, but worth it.
Oh, yes, absolutely. When we start to really value ourselves and understand who we are as this exquisite creation, it is so worth it. And we start seeing that all that stuff that we were worried about to start with wasn't about us anyway.
Yeah.
Even if it was our own mistakes. As I said, we did what we thought was right at the time.
Right.
And we began to understand that this stuff was put on us in our life. It's not who we are.
Correct. That's the distinction right there. Exactly. It was put upon us. It's not who we are. And that's the thing that, dang, if I would have been told that and realized that years ago, how profound that would be, because that was, I actually thought it was a mistake. It was just so much a part of me. I thought I was the only person in the world that was really a mistake. That was what I actually believed about myself.
Yeah, and I think that's why these discussions in your show is so important.
Yeah.
I had a lady who read my book when it first came out as a self-published version, and she was in her 80s. Her husband had already passed away. They had a beautiful relationship, wonderful family. She's lived a great life, but she knew me. She wanted to read my book, and she said that she really enjoyed it. She said, I got a lot out of it, but I wish I'd known this 50 years ago. I wish I'd have known this
Yep.
50 years ago. And so I think that's why we have to be talking about these things,
Yes.
because there's so many of us that wish we knew things earlier. And if we talk about it and get past some of the stigma, and
Mm-hmm.
we learn what love is, we can not only learn it for ourselves, but we can teach new generations
Yes.
before they have to learn it the hard
Yeah.
way,
So they
the
don't
way some
have
of
to
us did.
unlearn. They don't
Yeah,
have to
so they have to
unlearn and
unlearn it.
relearn.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. So what's the last component?
The last one is passion, and
Oh,
that is really a passion for life.
yeah.
Uh, Passion becomes the wind in our
Yep.
sails, the fuel in our engine. It is what really just lets us enjoy life.
True.
And so many people, as they go through the grind, and they're doing all the good things, they're successful in their career, they're good parents, they take care of their home, they're making good money, they've got a good marriage, all the stereotype things they can just check off the list and say, I'm a success in life. And then they wonder, is this it? And particularly
Yeah.
people that get to be, say, 30s,
Mm-hmm.
when they've been told since childhood, get a college degree
Yep.
or go to trade school or whatever they're told to do, get a good job, get a promotion, find that special someone, have the kids, buy the house, and they've checked off that list all through their 20s and 30s. They've checked the list off, they have it all, and they think, wow, what do I do now?
Yeah.
And what we forget is that we're doing these things in order to enjoy our life.
Right.
And that actually has to be done on purpose, because life is hard.
Mm-hmm.
And there's going to be plenty of stuff to be upset about. And the to-do list is never going to be over.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have to learn to keep our passion in life. And that really comes back to just one secret ingredient, and that is fun. Have fun
Mm-hmm.
as much as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it doesn't mean that you can do it all the time. Life is serious sometimes. That's why practicality is the third component of love. And sometimes life is tragic, and that's why grief is the first component of love. But the fifth component of passion is just as important.
Mm-hmm.
We learn to have fun. We enjoy life. We go in and we love what we do, and we enjoy the people we work with. We come home and we love the people that we are with, and we have fun with them. And we just enjoy life as much as possible. Can't do it all the time, but let's not miss a moment where we can. Find what is fun for you. And for some people that haven't done this before, you have to experiment. You don't know what's fun for you because you've been living in this dark place for
Yes.
so long. Just try stuff.
Yeah.
Go out and try it.
Yeah.
If you think it might be fun, try it. See what happens. If you don't like it, you're not out anything. Go to something else.
Exactly.
But learn to have fun, because, again, we're rewiring our brain
Mm-hmm.
to recognize, hey, this is fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And we have to learn that.
Right. I had and I mentioned this a few times on my podcast. I had a coach one time. This is really the only really profound thing that he ever said to me, but he said, Lisa, you're looking at everything black and white. Why don't you look at things through color? And at the moment I was like, ooh, I don't know what that means, but there's something to that. And he's right, especially when I look back now, but over time it really stuck with me. And I meditated on it a lot to try, and I knew there was something to it. And a lot of it was, I didn't have fun. I was so serious because I was in survival mode, and survival mode, you got to get stuff done, and,
Right.
and it was a struggle for me to have fun. When I had fun, it was awesome. But it was exhausting. And that is one thing in my life now, is I make sure I have fun. Like my husband and I have fun. We laugh. We have, I make an effort to have fun, because my natural tendency is just to be in that place of get stuff done,
Yeah.
And so, and I need to, especially in this, what I'm doing now, because it can be very dark. It can be very heavy, and it can be sometimes overwhelming. And so I make sure I have fun, whatever that feels like at the moment, but I make sure it's fun and I enjoy it. It could be just going outside after this podcast and throwing the ball around with my dogs.
Right. It doesn't matter what it is. Just enjoy life as much as possible. And you're not only, if this idea that it's selfish or
Yeah.
something to that effect, it's just not true. Again, who made that rule?
Love
We are
that. Who
actually
made
doing
that
this
rule?
to be healthy ourselves. And the more we are happy in our relationships, the more we're going to be engaged in them, the more we're going to enjoy them. And so we're doing that for the people we care about as well. If you're enjoying life every day, you're enjoying work, you're enjoying your home life, you're going to be better for the people around you too. So you're not just doing it for yourself. You're doing it for everyone in your life. And if you go through life, no matter where you start, if you know how to grieve the hurts of life, so that you have that comeback story. You know how to connect with people emotionally. You know how to live life in a practical way, making good decisions so that we can live life well together. You love yourself and appreciate and have compassion for yourself so that you can love others.
Mm-hmm.
And you keep passion, fun, part of your life as much as possible. You can build healthy relationships across your span of your life, at home, at work, in your neighborhood, and have the resources to do that if you live out all 5 components.
Yes. And one more thing I want to touch on about the passion, because I was sitting here thinking about my history. And, when I was in survival mode, I had passions. What's a passion?
Yeah.
Didn't have time for that.
Right.
And you gave a really good example of how to find your passions, because that's one of the things that so many people who are at the beginning of their healing journey or into their healing journey is it's hard to figure out what your passions are. It's hard to understand what it is you like. Excuse me. And like you said, just try stuff. And that's exactly what I did, because in 2016 is when I discovered I have no idea who I am. I don't know what my passion is. And I just started trying things. And there's no failure. If I tried it and I didn't like it, okay,
Right.
well, I can check that off my list. That's not something that I liked. How about this? And I find out, whoa, I really like this. So that's all it takes, is just try stuff. Be curious. If it's something that you're like, well, I always kind of wondered, try it.
Yeah, life is an experiment. We
Mm-hmm.
don't know what we want sometimes. We don't know what's going to be fun for us. We don't know how things are going to work out. Okay, just go for the ride.
Exactly.
Enjoy the ride, see what happens, learn as you go. We're going to do that anyway. We're going to learn as we go. That's the nature of
That's
life.
true.
And so why not do that intentionally? Set out there. I love the word curiosity that you use there. Just set out to understand life is a wild ride. We never know what's around the corner. Just enjoy every minute you can. And we have these resources like grief and practicality when it is serious and there are tragedies, but enjoy all the moments you can. Have as much fun as you can in life so that all this hard work you're doing for relationships in your home life and your job and the relationships at work and all these things that you're doing are worth it because you're truly enjoying it.
Exactly. And to the listeners who have not begun their healing journey or at the beginning, we've lived a life of a lot of pain. It's time to have a life of fun and enjoy it. There's enough pain already, and it's time to start enjoying life. We weren't created to suffer. We really weren't.
That's exactly right. Yes. Life has its fair share of suffering. We're going to endure that. But life has its fair share of fun and enjoyment and
Mm-hmm.
passion, and we should embrace that as well. Don't let the bad times keep you from the good times.
Exactly.
Enjoy the good in your life, and if you don't have any right now that you can point to, search for it. Look for it.
Yep.
Go find it. It's there somewhere.
And it's the good times that help us get through the hard times.
Absolutely.
If we always have bad times, we always have hard times, there's nothing to look forward to. It's really depressing. So we need to have those good times in our life. We need those. I call it kind of like a pressure release, right? We don't
Mhm.
need to be serious all the time. I did that, and trust me, it's exhausting. It's not fun. It's a miserable life. It really is.
Yeah, and you think if I'm serious all the time and I'm focused all the time on getting things done, what are you getting them done for? What are you striving for?
So
But
true.
if when you can say I'm doing this hard work of raising my kids because I truly enjoy my kids, that's a different statement
Yeah.
than I'm just checking off the to do list of all the things I have to do as a parent. And that doesn't mean you're going to enjoy every moment. Kids can drive you crazy, of course, and we can use that in every example of life.
Yeah.
Go into your job. Every job's going to be a grind
Hmm.
sometimes, but enjoy it as much as you can because you're putting a lot of work into it, a lot of hours into
Yeah.
it. So enjoy it
Yeah.
so that you can say, why am I doing all this? Because at the end of the day, yes, it pays the bills. Yes, it's what I do for a living, but I enjoy it
Yeah.
as much as possible.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. This has been really, really helpful and really profound. I mean, I've had a lot of aha moments. You've just said stuff. It's interesting because there's a lot of times that you said stuff that it's kind of puts the links together. It's kind of like I had this thought and you linked it and it made sense to me. And I know that it'll
Yeah,
help
in
the
my
listeners.
book, in my book, you probably will not learn anything that you didn't already know, But I've been told that before. When you read my book, it puts the things together so you could say, "Oh yeah, all that stuff I already know. I can now live that out in a practical way, in a way that is a learned skill set." So thank you for saying that, and I
Yeah.
and I hope that's exactly the experience people have when they see me on social media and when they read my book. I'm not going to teach you anything that's not rocket science. It's not something that you have to start over. You already know how to do this, but I can help you put the pieces together to live it out.
You kind of created a little bit of a playbook for us, a little bit of an outline, or at least some guidance, because that's the thing is we're just kind of, we tend to just kind of go through life and, well, I'll try this and see if it works. And,
Yeah.
and it's nice that you've given us the shortcut of like the practicality of the 5 components that help us to navigate this, because relationships are just super complex. We're complicated beings. There's no two
Yeah.
alike.
Yeah, we're very complicated. Life is complicated, but this gives a context
Right.
for being able to look and say, where am I missing it?
You're right.
And I'm doing 2 or 3 of these well, but what area am I missing? And so that's where we can put our focus, that we can go to counseling and say, I'm missing this part.
Exactly.
And it gives a context to live this out.
Exactly.
So I'm excited about the book coming out next year. As I said earlier, I hope people go to my website, markahicks.com, and get the free ebook, because the 5 components I've just outlined here are in that free ebook. And then next year in June of 2025, thanks to Morgan James Publishing, it will be available nationwide wherever books are sold.
Excellent. And so how can people reach out to you on social media? What are you on?
The best way is to go to my website.
Okay.
All my links are there
Okay.
to my YouTube channel. I've got a podcast. I've got all my social media. And I also have a contact form there. I'm available for speaking engagements, to do workshops,
Nice.
To speak in organizations, churches, wherever people might want me to speak. And also I'm available for coaching. And so if anybody would like to have me as a coach in your life, I'm available there too. So just go to my website. Again, it's Mark A. Hicks, M-A-R-K, my middle initial is A, Hicks, markahicks.com, and everything, all the links will be available, or contact me if I can be of service.
Excellent. Oh, that's awesome. So I've got one last question I ask my guests, not my listeners, the guests. It's for the listeners. What would you like to leave our listeners with?
Oh, that's a good one. I think the main thing I want people to know is that love is a learned skill set.
Yeah.
Don't be discouraged where you are now, even if you're in a very difficult place. You've come from a very difficult place and a lot of bad stuff has happened to you. There is a way through that, because love is a learned skill set. You don't have to wing it. And if you didn't learn it growing up, you can learn it now. It's okay.
It's not too late.
And if people learn that much and understand this is within my reach, because it's a learned skill set, it's nothing that I got robbed of. Nobody can take it from me. I can learn it. And so I hope everyone will know that much, so that we can all be on the path to life and love.
Oh, I love it. Thank you so much, Dr. Mark. I really appreciate it. And this has been really profound. And I'm really excited to get this podcast out there, because again, we can never learn too much about relationships. I mean, there's a lot of layers to them, and we could probably spend a lifetime learning. But, I love that you're giving a lot of people hope, because you're right. There's a lot of people that, they could be in their 40s or 50s or even older and like, well, can I do this now? Yes, you can. Absolutely.
Yes, you can.
Absolutely. So thank you so much for being a guest today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.